Hi there, folks. Yes, welcome to our Halloween special, Victorian Ghosts. Also, into the latter part of the period and Edwardian and on into the 1930s through the age of pale and yellow gas lamps and fireplaces flickering and all of those things. Now, traditionally, the Victorians told ghost stories at Christmas. We, of course, will go through our own holiday. Halloween, we have ghosts for Halloween. We don't get ghostly for Christmas unless we look at Scrooge and A Christmas Carol from Charles Dickens. The Victorian ghost story at Christmas tradition, though, was a big deal. Yes, those Victorians tales were designed to be read aloud at fireside. Family gathers around after an opulent dinner or being out wherever or what have you. So you sit back and it's story time. The stories were released as serials, that is, magazines. At Christmas time, traditionally ghosts, or there were annual Christmas collections, such as Dickens edited one with ghost stories. Some of these things were written by folks we would consider major novelists like Dickens and like Elizabeth Gaskell with The Old Nurse's Story and such. Some ghost stories, as we look at great bunches of them, were written by more casual or avocational writers. The Benson brothers, E.F. Benson, and especially you would find wrote bunches of ghost stories. Yes, as a hobby, were clergymen. M.R. James was a bit of a scholar and wrote ghost stories, also writing for pleasure. We also have folks writing these things in the name of putting dinner on the table, because this was the kind of writing that went with just popular Victorian writing, the things that would be sold in those magazines, those bunches of serials people would read. So, lots of writers writing relatively formulaic things a lot of the time. Some of them very, very well done. Some of them stylistic horrors. I can tell you about a few of those. We won't talk about those. Most rather nice things. The writing in them, by and large, should not be too horrible, because those ghost stories, supernatural stories, Victorian period, and on beyond it. This was family reading. These things were supposed to be safe for women and children. They weren't supposed to cause anything except some rather modest nightmares. Yes, and if your little one goes crying that he or she has been scared by the ghostly figures from Amelia Edwards, oh, well, that's okay, honey. Now you go back to bed, and all the rest of these things. Now, we'll find a little bit of real horror. We'll find it from Robert Louis Stevenson, who wrote a number of things with some real horror in it. The one we're looking at in this class is The Body Snatcher. It has real horror, but guess what? The real horror isn't the ghost. The ghost, the body of the long dissected Gray showing up at the end, isn't shown in graphic detail or big deal like that. It's there and scares the daylights out of the young versions of McFarlane and Fitness. And that's it. That's its thing in entirety. But there's lots of horror because we're in a dissecting lab, a medical lab, where the doctor and his assistants are procuring bodies who are, yes, dug up illegally. That part's easy. And murder victims. That part's not easy. But that's exceptional. Mostly we have ghosts. Some of them would be identifiable as real ghosts, and so you get real, alleged real, or within the spirit of willing suspension of disbelief, real ghosts about. And then you have, imagined ghosts, fake ghosts, things with logical explanations, ghosts created by creepy people. It goes with ghost stories. You do them in all those fashions. Now, vampires, you'll get some vampire stuff, but really not that much through most of the Victorian period, because remember, we're aiming to be safe for women and children. Vampires go with Gothic bodice rippers. People think there's something sexy about vampires, so your vampires come from, go with this scheme of Monk Lewis, and we don't have to have the vampires to get Gothic with the Bronte sisters and such, but they're a different kind of thing there. We're talking about our Christmas fair predominantly. Now, with our Christmas fair, hey, how do ghost stories work? Pretty simple, really. You create a scene. Sometimes it's an eerie scene, this dusty old abandoned mansion. Sometimes it's not eerie at all. It's nice and routine and comfortable, except it can't be modern looking. It's got to have a sense of age, tradition, and many years to it, because you've got to have time for the ghost to show up. But you get placid scenes sometimes, so as to set the shift more intently. Then your audience has to have an expectation. Something's going to happen. Sometimes that expectation is just a little item in the title or something like that. Sometimes you create it with that eerie atmosphere. Sometimes the writer's name at the top of the story is enough to create it. People look for those things. And then you've got to, sometime in the story and usually toward the end, so you can do a nice ooh climax, you produce an unexpected something. And the unexpected something, this takes work because the audience expects a ghost. That's why they're reading. So if the ghost comes in and just sort of chugs on in and says, "Hi there, I'm the ghost," this doesn't work at all. The audience will go on, and they'll never ever buy your stories again. So, ghost has to show up through some ironic twist, be different than anticipated in either form or behavior. You have to have something there to give the audience enough surprise, enough startle to go, and that's requisite. I mean, that's the idea of the ghost story, isn't it? So you do that. The other things you would do in these traditional ghost stories, you would persuade the audience to either root for the protagonist. Oh, here is our protagonist confronted with the frightful. Sometimes taking on the spirit world, we have ghost hunters. And sometimes perfect innocent going, the ghost. But sometimes your central character is some malicious, ugly whatever, and you root for the ghost. You can read about the sexton Gabriel Grubb in the Dickens story and watch the goblins kick him around, and you'll be saying, "Yay, goblins, get him, he deserves it, yay." But either way, you're going to take sides because it's fun. A Victorian ghost story, Edwardian ghost story, all of those pale gas lamp stories are about not great horror, carnage, and bloodletting. You get some in some of them on occasion, not that much. But they are about, yes, excuse me, folks, they are about creating this sense of, Oh, this little kick of adrenaline, this dash of something that might be called fear, and afterwards, the ability of the readers, of that little audience sitting around the fireside, to look at each other and say, "Ooh, that was scary." And that, folks, is a ghost story. That is the ghost story. You leave your audience gazing carefully into the shadows as they make their way off to bed, wary of sounds in the night, carefully looking into the closet and then closing and securing that closet door, huddling for the night in the middle of that big poster bed, tight together, nervous, 'cause ghosts are a proud